My whole economy was tied around him. With the second time we got married, he came with our plans for his own business, which was already impressive to me because he had a plan, he had a dream, he had a goal, and we started working on it together. Long story short, we ended up founding this company together and we ran it together. He was the CEO and I was the chief financial officer. We ran it together. And because I worked for the company just as he did, but in a different role, now I depended on what was provided by the company for me to be paid, that kind of thing. So when we broke up the second time, the board of directors voted to have me removed and kept him as the CEO. So I think I may have gotten one paycheck and that was it. I had no other job. And that it was a big surprise because I thought that the board realized the value that I had brought to that company. But when it was between him and I was given the boot.
You're listening to the Her Money Story podcast with your host, Felicia Gopaul. Every woman has a story that explains her relationship to money and finances, and a woman's story about money shapes her actions, both positive and not, for years to come. This podcast is for any woman learning how to take care of her money so that her money can take care of her now and into the future.
No one gets married, plans to get divorced. But as I mentioned in my book, Financial Confidence Now, sometimes over the years, Prince Charming becomes a little less charming. There's a divorce every 13 seconds in the United States. That equates to 277 per hour, 45,763 a week, and 4.4 million a year. Those are eyebrow-raising statistics, wouldn't you agree? This is episode number 5 of the Her Money Story podcast, and I'm your host, Felicia Gopaul. Today's guest is Suzette Vearnon, and who will share her story with you. And if you've ever been through a divorce or are currently going through a divorce or thinking about getting divorced, you'll hear in her story some parallel emotions that you might have felt, some scared expectations that you might have held about the role of a wife, and what she learned about herself as a result of going through 2 divorces from the same man. So, Suzette, welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate just the opportunity to lend my voice in hopes that it will help someone else to find theirs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So let's just talk about getting married to the same man twice. You have to start there. You have
girl. As I often tell people when they ask me that question, we need a couple of bottles of wine and a weekend, and we will be sloppy drunk by the time I get finished. Oh my gosh. But the first time that I got married to my son's father, I was very naive about marriage. I just thought it was going to solve everything. I always felt kind of weird and strange in my family, even though I knew I was loved. I still was a middle child and felt pretty invisible. And oftentimes my mom would sit us in front of the black and white TV, with the hanger in the back.
Oh, absolutely. I had one of those.
Yes. And I watched The Guiding Light and The Edge of Night and all those things, and Joanne Tate and all these wonderful characters as a little girl. And somehow between soap operas and Disney, I convinced myself that the solution was that I needed a handsome prince to come and rescue me. And so when the first man proposed to me, I felt like it was a sign. This was my opportunity. God had sent me my Prince Charming. And so, what do they say in the game of Monopoly? Do not pass go, do not collect $200.
Yes.
That was me. I went straight for it. I did not take the time to truly get to know him. But the truth of it, Felicia, I didn't even know how or what to get to know. And so I rushed into the marriage, and needless to say, within about 4 years, something hit me on my head and said, this is insanity. It was crazy from the beginning, but of course, I wanted to stay in there. I said my vows. I wanted to, be honorable toward God. And I wanted to hang in there and keep praying in the hopes that if I prayed hard enough, this man would change. Well, didn't happen. So then for first divorce, right? And so if I say about 1.5, 2 years, maybe 3 years, I was a single woman, but I did not get back out into the dating world.
Okay.
I continued. I immediately was hurled into single parent mindset, survival mode. Survival mode. No, there was no alimony. There was no child support. Survival mode. So I had to make it happen with a little kid in tow that I never had any intentions of being a single parent.
Okay.
So that I did. There were different guys that showed interest and were kind, but I just didn't have the time, whatever. I just kept my head down, worked, provided for him. That was it. Well, there was a point where my son just started missing his dad. He started crying, my daddy, my daddy, my daddy. And so I reached out to his dad and said, listen, our son needs you. So, let's put our feelings aside for him. And I think what happened was during that time, I was going through a traumatic situation of my own. And he was there. Of course, he knew me very well.
Yeah.
So with him coming to see our son, conversations, how are you doing? Suzette, I know you, you're not all right. And so you start sharing.
Yes.
And, for me, sometimes it's like you connect with somebody emotionally before you do sexually. At least that's for me. And so it seemed like he was different. He was there. He was accessible. He even told me that he promised God that if he had another chance with me, he would do right this time. And so I figured, if my son's father wants to do right by us, then I owe it to give it another chance. Again, it was rushed. Again, I did not really go deep enough to know the difference that needed to happen in order for us to make it. I just thought, hey, this is another opportunity. He's available. He's being kind and available for our son. He's being caring. He's listening to me. And so next thing I knew, we were back at the altar again, getting married a second time. This time, unlike the first time, my whole economy was tied around him.
What do you mean by that?
Well, first time I had my own job. And so when we broke up, I didn't really suffer that much. Emotionally, yes, but not financially because I had a good job. With the second time we got married, he came with the plans for his own business, which was already impressive to me because he had a plan, he had a dream, he had a goal, and we started working on it together. Long story short, we ended up founding this company together and we ran it together. He was the CEO and I was the chief financial officer. And so we ran it together. And because I worked for the company just as he did, but in a different role, now I depended on what was provided by the company for me to be paid, that kind of thing. So when we broke up the second time, the board of directors voted to have me removed and kept him as the CEO. So I think I may have gotten one paycheck, and that was it. I had no other job. And that came it was a big surprise because I thought that the board realized the value that I had brought to that company. But when it was between him and I was given the boot. And so now I am leaving my house appraised at $365,000, leaving the luxury cars, leaving the home-based company, and embarking upon trying to find my own place without a car of my own and a son in tow who was already going through his own difficulties and struggles because of the breakup. And I had to create it all from scratch. I had to create it all from scratch. And so from that standpoint, I did not leave with a job. I had to create it. And so it was very difficult. I had to borrow cars. It was just really bad. I lost everything, even the friendships that we had made as a couple. I thought those were going to last. Lost everyone. So I was literally devastated. And I tell people it felt like my ship that I was in got busted and my son and I washed on shore, just us and some planks and nothing else.
So you married the same man twice.
Yes.
The first time you had your own.
Yes.
The second time you had built your economy around this man, your job, health insurance, cars,
Everything.
house, everything was tied to this man. Yes. And so when you got divorced, all of that stuff disappeared, including your friends.
Yes, even before the divorce was final. At separation, gone.
Yeah.
Gone. I mean, everything. I had never had that happen to me before, to the point that I'm sitting there in my 40s. Felicia, I was in my 40s, and it's just like, oh my God, I never expected to be here. I never expected to be here with no job opportunities in sight. And I'm sitting here wondering, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
So talk about how that felt for you. Have everything disappear and have to rebuild that. I can imagine you had conversations with yourself.
Girl, I think for a while I just kind of sat there bug-eyed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did I get here?
Yes.
I did everything right. At least I thought so, the way I was raised.
Talk to me about that.
Well, I was a church-going, God-fearing woman.
Okay.
And even, I'll say church-going, God-fearing to the exponential power, because I grew up in a holiness church.
Okay.
So, talk about rules, trying to really do what's right. Heaping helping of that. And then my parents were very much into you keeping your word. You made a promise to God, living right, having integrity with what you do, and I tried to do that in everything that I did, to be a good wife, to be a good mother, to have integrity, to have character. We were even ministers in the church that we were in. So, I would pray with other people at the altar.
Okay.
So to have all that and to be in a place where people admire you, they might even envy you, because here you are, a young couple living their dream.
Okay.
Nice home, owning your own business, a very smart, well-behaved child, being honored in leadership at your church. And to suffer that, and even I was so embarrassed and I felt so humiliated and paranoid, I even left the church because I was wondering, who was whispering about me. I felt like, I was boo-boo the fool. How many people knew what was going on? And here I am trying to be a dutiful wife. And add to that, my husband had what many people liken to multiple sclerosis. There was some tests that said yes, and other tests that said no. So the doctors gave it some kind of fancy medical term. But during over the duration of our marriage, he started declining. So not only did I suffer the loss of a marriage and everything, but now people are saying, how could she leave a man like that? He's a minister, and this man he's wheelchair bound. He's doing the best he can. How could she leave him? So I really felt like my whole world was just blown apart. And it was beyond devastating. It was crushing. My faith in everything. My faith in God, my faith in people, my faith in marriage, my faith in myself. Everything came into question, all at the same time. If there's one area where that happens, we have the other areas that we can kind of, navigate. But to have it all happen at one time, I could hardly catch my own breath. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me and I could hardly breathe.
So when we talked before about this, one of the things that you said is you hadn't protected yourself. So if you were to look back and at this situation, how could you have protected yourself?
I should have done something that Mama said a long time ago, but I felt like, well, maybe that was you and Daddy. Me and my husband, we don't have to worry about this.
Okay.
He used to tell me, baby, always put a little to the side for yourself. Always put a little side. You better have a little something on the side. And I thought, that was you and Daddy. With Daddy, I can understand why you say that. But this man and me, we are here. We get each other. That ain't gonna happen to us. So we had joint everything. And if I were to do it differently, I would have put a little to the side, because I think one of the worst things that can happen is for you to know that you've got to leave a bad situation. You got to get out, whether it's for your physical protection or your emotional protection. You've got to get out. You cannot handle it another day lest you have a mental breakdown and you got to go. It's better to know you got some bank, something to tide you over while you're rebuilding, than to have nothing. I had to file bankruptcy. I had nothing. I even had to add to my bankruptcy order the divorce attorney, because I couldn't afford to pay her anymore. I mean, nothing. I had absolutely nothing. If my mom, my sister had not helped me to the best that they could, I had nothing. And if I had to do it over again, that's something I definitely would have done. I would have done it.
So what advice, if any, would you give a woman who was currently going through it, or just went through it, or is contemplating that she may be there very shortly?
I would say, if she's making her mind up, if she's kind of ambivalent, should I, shouldn't I, and she's still trying to figure it out, I would not wait until the decision is made. Regardless to whether she decides to stay or go, I would put something aside. And I would tell her, lose the guilt, because I felt guilty. I felt like I was betraying my husband's trust to take a little of the money that we made from the company that was supposed to go into the pot for our family, but to take some aside felt dishonest to me. But in wisdom, I think I could have gotten over the guilt. It's like, you get over the guilt really fast when, you have to decide food on the table. You get over the guilt really fast. And I would say, if you're in that point of making a decision, go on and start putting you something to the side. If you have to sell things on eBay, whatever way you have to do it, if you have to have a side hustle, put that money to the side. That way you still have a certain amount of dignity and independence. You have that. For those of you that might have done like I did, grab what you can get real fast and jet. I would say, even though it's hard, don't sell yourself cheap. It took a while, but I had to realize it wasn't just the technical thing that I did with the financial controlling. It wasn't just being technically savvy. It was the brains behind it. It was coming up with processes. It was the inner brilliance that I was lending to that. And I had to tap into it and realize that it was transferable. And it took a mind shift, and it took a while. I had to intentionally feed myself empowering information because I didn't have confidence in my ability to go at it alone. I had more confidence in what I could do to help him build his dream than what I could do to help me build mine. And so it took really getting naysayers out of my head. It took really me bombarding myself with something positive, inspirational, those kind of things that tell you who you are and that you're brilliant and what to do and how to do it, so that I could create a space inside of me for the possibility that I could do something. And out of that space, I started creating ways out. I started asking folks, in talking to people about different things, my brain would start going, and I started showing them opportunities for me to help them in ways they didn't even think about. But had I not changed my mindset, I wouldn't have even thought about that. And so it took some time. But I don't know if I told you, but the first thing I did after I left and I was trying to figure it out, I was friends with a Mary Kay representative.
Okay.
And she was on target to be a national sales director. And we had been friends for a while because, I would buy my Mary Kay from her. And over the years, our sons were about the same age, and we really garnered a friendship. And I remember we were talking. She was talking about how it was during the time with directors where newsletters were really popular. They were starting to gain popularity. And everybody was having newsletters. And she said, Suzette, I ain't got time for no newsletters, girl. But all my uplines are telling me I need to have newsletters. And my brain went, I said, you know what? I could do that for you. I said, I tell you what, let me show you what I could do to help you with your newsletters. And I took my little different software I had for desktop publishing that I had kind of accumulated, because that was something that I kind of did as a side hustle for fun. I've always been creative that way. And I created her the best newsletter I could. I looked at all the different ones. I did my homework and I looked on different people's and looked at theirs, and I said, I'm going to make hers so good. She's going to be the envy of everybody. And I did it. And from that, she hired me to be her administrative assistant. And my main thing was putting together her newsletter. And her downline liked it so much that I got 2 other people who wanted me to do it for them. So that was the first thing. And that was the first time I was like, oh, I can create something that people will want to pay money for. And it lasted. It's like there were different situations like that because you jump from plank to plank to plank to plank till you find your thing. And
Right.
I had to become very creative because when that ended, then I had to think of something else. So I had to continue to create. There were times I went back in the workforce, did some bookkeeping, did some accounting. And if it was a temporary job, then in between temporary jobs, I had to figure out other ways. So I became very good at juggling between things. And sometimes I got paid well, other times it was very lean, but I made it. And that's what I would tell people who find themselves in a situation like mine. Don't sell yourself cheap. You are the brilliance behind whatever it is you do, and take the time to find what makes you brilliant, not just what you do or what you used to do, but what was the brilliance that you brought to it, and develop that. And you'll find that as you develop it, things will start being attracted to you. Situations, instances, opportunities, conversations. Don't be ashamed. I've told people I needed a job. I won't shame. Yes, I went from a $365,000 house living to a 2-bedroom apartment, about 700, maybe 800 square feet, and was driving my mama's car. And I needed a job.
Well, there was so much that I can unpack about that, but I think that you asked for help.
Yes.
You took the help that was offered. So many times I see women to want to have a persona of I'm all together, as opposed to what is really so about their finances or their life. And so I really applaud you for that. Suzette, was there anything you said that you really started to feed yourself and tap into your creativity? Was there anything that you did? Were there books that you read, podcasts that you listened to? What did you do to just strengthen and empower yourself? Because that, I think, is something important for women who want to say, I'm enough. I don't need anything on the outside.
And then because sometimes you don't know where to start. When
Right.
you've been devastated, all you're doing is you're just like, I'm counting my fingers and toes. They're all there. And that's about all I can do. Back then podcasts were not big. Because
Right.
I'm turning 60 this year.
Okay.
So you're talking about about 20 years ago, between 15 to 20 years ago. So podcasting wasn't a big thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
But I had determined, or I think rather, life had taught me that books were very helpful. One of the books that helped me to recover my own dignity when it came to relationships and love and making wiser choices about love was Love is a Choice.
Mm.
I had never heard that ever before in my life. Nobody had ever told me love was a choice. Love was something you fell into.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that.
And you didn't, and you the way you could tell you were in love, you couldn't eat, you couldn't sleep. So it was almost like if you're in love, you're in the deaf, dumb, and blind section. So to see a book that said love is a choice, bam. And that book started healing my own self-perception
Mm.
in a very real way. I finally felt found after years of trying to live life on somebody else's terms, because I needed their validation to be okay. This was the first time that I felt like something really spoke to me. I felt like I was literally found. I was lost, and this book found me, is the way I felt. And so when you have that kind of situation where you feel found, that's what I did. I went to the library, got me a library card, and I stayed in the self-help psychology section because I needed to build up myself mentally and emotionally and get right in my own self-esteem, my own self-concept. That's where I started. And most people think, well, why do you read books about business and stuff like that? I don't know. I think for me, it was so important for me to build up me because I was so broken down, and so, yeah, resumes and all that. I've been taught that already, but to have confidence in who I was as a lovable person, as a valuable person, to find my own voice and to have a vision bigger for myself. I stayed in the psychology, self-improvement, self-help. And somehow or another, in the course of reading those books, you're going to find out some things about business because the people who are writing these books are in some type of business or are talking about some type of trauma where they got laid off on their jobs or whatever. So I started with that. And after a while, I kind of started broadening out. And so it's the reading and the telling the people that I needed help. Those two things I think were very key.
Got it. So you have triumphed over the divorce. You're remarried.
Yes, I am.
You're a grandmother now.
I am.
So brag on yourself, Suzette. Brag on yourself. Let us know. What are you up to now?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've started my own bookkeeping company. And I'm happy to say that I'm a business owner. I started out as a temp. And when I started out as a temp, I literally heard God's voice, or if you'd rather, my inner wisdom, whichever way you want to say it. But I heard it say to me, if you do well in this job, you can flip it. Because I was already a temp for a staffing agency. And that voice said, you can become that if you do well in this job. So didn't know whether to call it God or what, but it just resonated with me. And something inside me knew that it was something that I needed to pay attention to. So I started really asserting myself and really taking the time to really impress these people. And just as sure as the road goes by my house, when my hours were complete with the staffing agency, that company offered me a job. And by then I had determined within myself that I didn't want to work for somebody else.
Okay.
That I really wanted to have my own thing. And so when they offered it to me, I sat and I said, I really appreciate it. I said, but really, I'm at an age in my life right now because I was in my 50s when this happened. I said, I'm at an age right now that I feel like if I don't go for my dreams, I won't get another chance. And they said, okay. Long story short, they became my first client. And the contract that I negotiated with them was big enough that contract by itself was enough for me to become my own boss. And so that was, oh my God, about 5 or 6 years ago. And so now I own the business and I have someone that I employ to take care of it. I'm more of a PR person and I help here and there, but for the most part, that job is generating enough income to fund my joy, which is coaching and writing and speaking and podcasting. And so I am able to do that. About 4 years ago, about maybe 8 years ago, actually, I met my now husband. This one's a keeper, y'all. I think he's a keeper. So we dated for 4 years. And at 55 years old, I married the love of my life. And we are going on our 5th year, and I'm still smiling. He is a wonderful man. And my son, who actually I'm going to be interviewing for my podcast after this one, for Father's Day, he is now the proud father of twin boys.
Oh.
So I'm a grandmama, I'm a Grammy with these 2 boys. I'm happily married. I have a lovely life that I'm continuing to co-create with God. And I have a business that's taking care of things. And I'm living beyond what I could have comprehended back then. I didn't see this. I did not see this at all. But when you take the time and do the work, if you'll just be honest with yourself and do the work, and get help. I think that was very important. I got professional help. I saw a psychiatrist. I saw a therapist. I used EAP at work, at those different junctures in life where I was overwhelmed or going through something challenging or traumatic. Between reading those self-help books and going and being on somebody's couch, people, I worked through some stuff. And now I am very happy. Happy, happy, happy. I do not look like what I've been through. There is joy on the other side.
So, Suzette, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Let me just ask you one last thing. Do you feel like you had to go through what you went through to get to where you are now? Or could there have been a way for you to not have been through down that road and gotten to where you are now?
That is a fantastic question. I think sometimes you sit and you think, if I hadn't have done this, or if I knew then what I know now, I would have done it a lot differently. But I think the longer that you live, Felicia, especially if you go through something and gain something from the go through, you realize that it had to happen the way that it happened. Especially because I believe a divine consciousness is at work in my life that gave permission for me to be tempted as I was, for me to fall into the situations I fell into, for me to go through what I went through, not because, he's got a wicked sense of humor, but because of purpose. I wouldn't be able to sit here right now and to tell you what I've just shared from a place of authority and dignity and enoughness had I not gone through what I went through and gained some piece of clarity about myself in the process. And I add that point because I've seen many people who have survived, but they still are carrying a chip on their shoulder.
Yes.
They haven't allowed grace to process them to the point that they realize, hey, I might have blood on my clothes, but I survived it. That means I was bigger than what tried to destroy me.
Yes.
And until people get that and realize, oh my, I made it through. And what did I gain? I gained a greater understanding of what makes me enough. I found out, like I said in the beginning, I was stronger than I even knew. And so, in answer to your question, I think I had to go through every single thing to get to where I am. Every single thing. Now, would I want to do it again? Heck to the no. No, 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 no. But as I look back, am I grateful for it? Yes, I am. I'm grateful.
All right, Suzette, this has been an extraordinary interview, and I appreciate your time, your grace, your story. I think there was a lot that you shared today that will resonate with the women who have been through a divorce. I think that I especially concur with if they've gotten to the point where they no longer have a chip on their shoulder about it, there was a lesson that they could have learned out of there. And I'm hoping that it is informing them and allowing them new choices. One of the things that you said to me that I'm reminded of in our pre-interview was, if you hadn't learned anything, you could have very well married the same man.
Yes.
A third time in a different suit.
That's the truth. That's right. And that's why that Love is a Choice book was so key, because it started me on the journey of slowly making incremental shifts in what I look for. Did it happen overnight? No. Did I fall a lot? Yes. But you know what I decided, Felicia?
What?
I decided I'd rather fall forward than to fall back. So I fell a lot. But after a while, my choices of men and what I attracted got better. I made progress. Some things stuck because it takes a while to unlearn things that have been ingrained in us for years. It takes a while. And so I just started learning to fall forward. Till after a while, I stopped falling. And I was able to stand on my own 2 feet and have clarity about the kind of man that I wanted and how to recognize him. Because I think that's another issue too. A lot of times we know what we want, but we don't know how to recognize it.
And the person who hasn't grown won't recognize them even if he showed up.
That's right. That's right. They might think they can, but no, they can't. They can't. There's no way you can see clearly when you got on rose-colored glasses. Ain't no way. And a lot of us don't think we have them on. And I think sometimes that's to our detriment. That blind spot, keeps us in denial. And that's why I say seek a professional, because it took that to help my eyes to become open. And for me to see things that even reading helped me to a certain point, but having someone else in real time giving me objective opinions and pointing things out and challenging certain things in a real way, human energy to human energy, it made a big difference. It made a big difference.
So thank you, Suzette. Thank you so much for your time today. If somebody wanted to take a listen to your podcast, where would they find it?
They would find it. Oh, it's everywhere. I Googled it and I was like, oh my gosh. It ended up in places I didn't even put it in. But most people that I know listen to Apple Podcasts or iTunes. So if they went to bit.ly/enough factor, they would find my podcast. But it's everywhere. Stitcher, Google Play Music, Spotify. It's soon going to be on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, TuneIn. I mean, just about everywhere. Listen Notes, Luminary? Luminary. It's everywhere. So, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. And listeners, keep tuning in to listen to the next episode of Her Money Story. There'll be another woman who will be sharing her insight and life with you. And I hope when you're listening, you get to hear what you've heard in today's podcast, which is somebody who was vulnerable enough to share what she's been through and how she has triumphed. And that's really my hope and prayer for you with my podcast. So again, thank you, Suzette. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Her Money Story Podcast. Want more from Felicia Gopaul? Then subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss a minute. While you're there, feel free to rate and leave a review. We really appreciate it. And if you're interested in going deeper, visit FeliciaGopaul.com. Thank you again, and we'll catch you in our next episode.